We were just talking about Easton Cowan. Obviously, last year in Buffalo, you had some kids, namely Zach Benson, right, who sort of came out of nowhere to crack that roster. As a coach, Donnie, what are you looking for from a youngster in training camp? You're giving him a big opportunity, as we referenced, going to play with Mitch Marner and Max Domi tonight.
Well, there's the pressure that you should put him under to see more. Obviously, now is the time in training camp. If you have to make a decision on a young guy, I can remember a year ago putting Benson with Tuck and Thompson, or Thompson and Skinner pretty much the whole camp, and even had uh, people on the staff or even a player or two mention, how come he's getting that situation and others aren't, because obviously we had many other first round picks, but we had an injury to Jack Quinn, and Jack Quinn wasn't going to be back until late December or early January, we thought at that time. So I felt we needed to see Zach under pressure, and a big part of playing in the NHL, which you guys know, is handling adversity. And really the big adversity that people don't think of is the pressure of playing with the guy next to you, and handling and being mature enough to handle when, I would tell kids even at the national hockey team program, you've got all this confidence, but when you get to an NHL and you get to an NHL game, I want you to visualize, maybe you're drafted by the Blackhawks, you're playing an exhibition game in the United Center, and your line mates are Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. And it's all great. You're all excited till you get to the game, and all of a sudden, your first shift, the puck's in your own net, and you wonder what your responsibility was on that play. So you're thinking, okay, I'll just go ask one of those guys. They might not say anything to you. They might be pissed off. They might say something to you to be nice, but somewhere in the back of their mind, they're probably thinking or feeling like, if I have to tell you what you did wrong, I'm not so sure I want you on my line, because I don't want to be -1. And if you go back to the bench and you want to ask that same question to an assistant coach or the head coach, God forbid you ask the head coach, because he may walk down the bench and say, hey, remind me to tell the general manager after the game. This kid doesn't know what he's doing. So, there's lots of pressure. I can remember Zach was amazing because he's a very unique case. He could handle that type of situation. He had such a feel for the defensive side of the game, for his responsibilities as delegated by you as a head coach. I mean, if you put him on the first line, there's a different set of responsibilities than maybe the third line or fourth line. You're on the first line situation, you're kind of working for your line mates. You're on a third line or fourth line situation, you're working with your line mates, if that makes sense, as one objective. So, but Benson was incredible from the get-go, and it was an easy decision to keep him.
Yeah, can you tell our viewers a little bit about, what the risk is with a player that's young, and say that, like you phrased it perfectly, like some of those pressures that, fans might not understand are there, like, who do I ask? What do I say? How much do I divulge about what I'm uncertain about? Is it good to ask questions? Am I going to get judged for asking questions? You put a kid that's that young into that situation. From a coaching standpoint, what's the worry about putting a kid into that situation and having him, it not go as well as he would have liked?
Stunting their development. Obviously, if you're management, you've got a lot of pride in the guy you drafted. You're watching him develop. You've got a vision for him in the future, but you're handing him off to the head coaches and the coaches. And now your greatest concern is, oh my God, are we stunting this guy's development? They want to protect the development because, when you draft a kid, you're drafting him on his potential. So you want that to keep going and going. And what Rosie hit there was perfect, was confidence. And it's all about confidence. And you work with these younger guys, and I tell them, I've had many conversations, and, they'll come up to that next level, and you work with them, and they'll be like, oh my God, or their agent will talk to you, and they've lost their confidence. My reply is, did you ever play at this level? Because if you didn't, your confidence is still at your previous level. So all that confidence you had is in junior hockey. You scored 50 against guys that aren't playing in the NHL and aren't in the NHL. Yes, you had every reason to be confident, but you're now in the NHL. You don't, that confidence doesn't necessarily carry directly over unless you know the game and know your responsibilities. Again, what's being delegated of you by the coach? What slot are you in? What's the situation on the ice? I know in Buffalo, we had a young team the last few years. A big part of our development was situational awareness. What's the score on the clock? What time is in the game? Did your defenseman change? Do they need a line change behind you? Do we need a whistle? It's not just in most young guys, they want to prove themselves. And by proving themselves, they usually want to hop over the boards and try to score. And so when you're doing that, you're not reading those plays in the situation itself. And that comes with a lot of maturity, and it's a process. And, back to Benson, he had a lot of those attributes. So I don't know, Cowan, but those are things I'd look for.
Yeah, sometimes it works with those young kids. I don't know where it comes from, but they just take the moment and run with it. It's always shocks me when young kids do that. But on the other side of the spectrum, Austin Matthews, he leaves and is not going to participate with a bit of an upper body injury. I know what camp is like for those star guys. Sometimes these phantom things kind of come up where they just don't really feel like participating. Not saying that's what's happening, but what's your philosophy as far as, say, a star player on how to manage their time and their output during a time like camp and preseason?
Yeah, it's everything is situational, and you're obviously you're leaning heavily on your sports science guys, and your training room and your doctors with each particular case, and you're looking at your schedule. I mean, you need him for the regular season. So now it's okay. Can sports science compensate? In the context of this injury, to keep his baseline there, or even work and elevate his baseline and challenge him more without going in. But the ideal is, ideally you'd love to have him in practice. This is a situation where, he doesn't need to develop chemistry with the group around him. He's not a guy you just brought in by a trade, that needs to get acclimated to things. I think, he's the coach that's coming in is very experienced. I think they're going to be able to communicate and be on the same page for game one. So it really is, the objective is game one, and you don't want to mess with that. So, but a lot goes into it.
You coach Matthews in the development program back in the day. In your wildest dreams, could you have ever expected he'd be this damn good at hockey?
That's an easy yes. And I've coached hundreds and hundreds of players, and the answer would be probably no for every single one of them to get to where Austin's at, 69 goals last year, and just the elite level he's at. But you might have heard me tell the story the other morning on XM, the morning skate with the guys. He was 2 weeks into the national team program. My brother Tony was assistant coach in Pittsburgh at the time, obviously on the ice with Malkin and Crosby every day. And 2 weeks in, I remember calling him and saying, I had to talk to somebody at that level in hockey and say, Tony, I think I have a kid here that might be every bit as good as the guys you have there. And I'm talking about Crosby and Malkin, different way. And he's like, are you out of your mind? You had a kid for 2 weeks and you think this is, and I said, I have to tell somebody. You can tell me I'm an idiot, but I have to tell somebody. And obviously, he was that special and noticeable that quick. So many intangibles and just elite level talent was the primary.
And having the experience that you do with teams in locker rooms, what was your take on them taking the captaincy away from John Tavares in the last year of his contract and giving it to Austin Matthews? Were you for that, or did you think that would be, maybe potential mistake?
You know what, Jay? I'm not there, but the first thing you mentioned, and it sounds like I don't mean to nail you on this by any means, but taking away the captaincy. It's the drama, right? The market, my God, we took away the captaincy. I have a feeling that Tavares, if you're Tavares and you can help bring a guy along and be a sounding board for him and help in a transition, my God, that's got to be an exciting opportunity for him as well, and something that I'm sure will be rewarding for him. Because knowing Austin, you can't not have respect for him. And the other thing, you can't, when from day one, I saw that kid and the way he worked and his love for the game, you want to be a part of his career because it's special and you're around something special. So I think for John to contribute in a different way, I would imagine he's, I don't know him, but I see him and his reputation is strong and great. And I would imagine he's pretty charged up to be a special part of that transition.
As mentioned, you coached against the Maple Leafs with Buffalo the last couple years. Sheldon Keefe was head coach. Now it's Craig Berube. What did you think of the hire, and how much of a difference you think Berube can make here in Toronto?
Well, there doesn't have to be a big difference because they're close. So, while you're looking for big and grand and grandiose, I think Sheldon and his coaching staff did an incredible job. They did a job that they brought that franchise, better and better every year. Those players, they increased their internal expectation, which is something you want to do as a coach. They took what the coaches laid out, Sheldon being the leader of the bunch, internalized it and demanded more of themselves. You could see that. You could see that type of progression. So he's leaving behind a team that's that has been very close. And now the organization is bringing in obviously a leader that is a leader in Craig, that's been there, that's walked the walk, that has a presence, and it's a different voice, and that can be a boost. And they don't need a lot. You don't want to get straight offline, I think, is probably the big thing, and make a ton of changes or say a ton of things need to be fixed, because they've been damn good and damn close here for quite a few years. And they made one big change in the head coach and in leadership. And I think, that can go a long, long way.
And do you think that could be, a problem that's mental? I mean, you talked about, you have high praise for this group. They're always there competing in a really tough Atlantic division, and they just keep falling flat at the most opportune times. Do you think that's a mental problem that maybe a change in, coaching style could alleviate? Or what do you think the problem is in Toronto over the last handful of years?
Yeah, well, I don't think of Toronto as a problem from the outside. I think a lot of teams would love that problem that Toronto has. Is, as you say, they're like I said, they're a very, very good hockey team that lost in a Game 7 again last year. They lost in Game 7. I can't remember, but you guys know way better than I do. But they're extremely close. So they're in a real good situation. Jake, repeat your question again on the end there.
If you think I mean, the expectations, obviously they're inflated in Toronto, but the expectations are for them to go deeper when it matters in the playoffs. That's what the fan base is craving. Do you think them coming up short is a mental problem?
It takes a special it takes special people to play in that market. It just does. It's that market. There's more to lose, I guess. There's greater consequence. You pay a greater price for your mistake. So, a lot of times you're forced to, you're caught. You're okay. Do I really put my ass on the line? Or that market can force you to be very conservative. And then conservative gives you, average or above average. And, you got to have some guts in that market. You got to have a lot of guts in that market. And that's why, I think Sheldon did an incredible job just dealing with the press and the media and keeping that team moving forward and progressing all the way to the end. That team kept getting better. And now he hands it off to a guy that's, again, walked the walk that Craig has. I think it's the right guy. And I think those two were the right guys for that market, that you need that confidence to say, okay, there's going to be negative consequence. I mean, I hear talk after two preseason losses. I'm sure that a guy like Craig Berube is laughing at that internally, without, no disrespect to anybody else. But, it boils, like, what matters is getting into the playoffs, number one. And then is my team ready to win that Game 7 if it gets to that point, or that moment. And if you're in those markets that you're in, can beat those players up so much. I look at it this way. I've been around lots of players, and say you got a third line guy in the NHL, and he learned, he was a star in junior hockey, and you'll know this, Jay, but he's not going to get that power play time in the NHL. He thought he had 100 points in junior hockey. But he figures out over the course of a couple of years, maybe he hits waivers, maybe he's on his third NHL team. Now he's 24. He's still lucky to be in the league. And he figures out, you know what? If I just chip a puck in and I'm not a minus player and I block a shot and I get off the ice in time, there's coaches in this league that are going to love me and I'm going to make money. And some of those guys make $3-4 million a year. And what they learn is, and what's happening is they're learning to be conservative. They're playing to not make a mistake. And a market like Toronto can force you to start playing not to make a mistake, and you lose a little bit of, that flamboyance and swagger. It can take the swagger right out of you. And I think, again, you have to have the right personalities and people in there. I think the core guys that are there have that. Those are core guys. Those guys have swagger, and they can handle that market. I think it's getting more of that. And I think Craig and his staff will do a great job in that regard.
Less is more sometimes, and sometimes as a coach, you have to make tough decisions. Among the many good moves you made with Buffalo is moving that stallion Tage Thompson up the middle, an absolute stud. But I wanted to translate that to the Leafs world. They're trying Willie Nylander at center again. Do you like that experiment, and how much different does that make that Maple Leafs forward core with a guy like Nylander up the middle?
I think anytime you can diversify a guy, it's going to help you. Every team, that you go against and coaching staff is trying to scheme against you. And you add one more element in there, in an offset, and he can make guys on the flanks, if he's at center, even better. Yes, that's impactful. And now is the time to try it. Now is the time to try lots of different things. Let's keep it in context. You're trying this stuff. Nobody's committed to anything, but now's the time to look and see and try things out. Who knows? You do know one thing: there's going to be injuries and there's going to be fluctuations, and you're going to need to fill different holes. And if you can diversify your guys and you get a talent like that can fill different slots, it's going to be a bonus at some point.
Don, one last thing before we go. We were talking before you got on, at this point in camp, you're trying to figure out what that roster is going to look like. In your experience, when you're in behind closed doors talking about who to put on opening night roster, and say there's 3 guys that could fill your third line left wing spot, and with a team that's as close as the Leafs are, and just those tweaks and those adjustments to get the chemistry right, what kind of things are you looking at when it's not a clear-cut decision on who to go with for a certain roster spot?
When you start sliding into those slots, what comes to mind for me is what's their impact to the people around them. Because you're looking at your top guys they're going to be the power play guys. They're going to be the guys you put out, the final minutes. You're behind a goal, but those slots are your energy guys, your guys that are they wearing on your opponent? Do they know their responsibilities? Or do they know how to impact the game in that slot and role? So usually you're looking at a little bit more maturity, and we would add some more grit, maybe some pushback against the other team to open up, more space for your talent. That's what comes to mind. So if you're just looking at that as a clear slot and what you do now, if you have a specific centerman you're putting him with, maybe you're looking at chemistry. The next step is chemistry, or that would be part of the first step, I guess. But yeah, lots of different things go into it. But you'd be comparing, if you had 3 different players compete for that spot, that would be one thing, or some things that come to mind for me.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.